young player. His style is very effective. You just want to add a few more weapons here and there, but you don't change the style. You know, it got him to where he is, and he's an extremely frustrating opponent to play against.
Yep, and it looks like we have games in progress here. You mentioned Denis not changing his style. That's something that we come to expect from him. Consistency, being solid, and now we're into the action here. Looks like solid to start off, Eric. No surprise. E4, E5, and Hikaru is happy to start things off. Not looking to do anything too much in the opening. Remember, usually feeling things out in the 5-minute portion is what I've seen from my experience commentating these Speed Chess Championship matches, seeing what works, seeing what positions you can get, and how your opponent reacts to, you know, maybe playing more positionally or going for an attack. We know that Denis does not like to take too many risks.
No, and we're seeing a Berlin defense. That is one of the most solid openings. The main way to get an advantage against it is you have to play some theory, bring out some prep. It's not an easy opening to just freestyle as white and expect much of an advantage. So Hikaru, definitely, if he's entering it, playing these E4 lines, he knows Denis is going to play very solid, maybe some drawish Spanish type of systems. It's going to need some preparation.
And we see already this maneuver, the knight from C6 for black, dropped E7, over to G6. For white, the knight from D2 can go to F1 and G3, another very common maneuver. And, you know, we developed the knights so naturally to C3 and F3 all the time. It's what we learned in chess when we're starting out. And then this maneuver, however, in this structure is the most common. And you're highlighting that this bishop, now the decision needs to be made. Having played D4 for white, there are extra options like bishop D3 and even bishop back to F1, which is a higher level move, Eric, but something that can make a lot of sense here.
Definitely. You want to preserve that light squared bishop. There haven't been any pawn exchanges. Bishops get stronger as the position opens up later on in the game. And, you know, neither player wants to release the tension in the center. So everything focuses around, you know, that pawn on D4, that pawn on E4. Black sometimes tries to play D5 to equalize. But in the meantime, the players are maneuvering in preparation for that center opening up.
Yeah, and that bishop on F1, it looks weird to maybe bring it all the way back, but there's sometimes an idea to play the move G3, and the bishop can make its way to G2, while the G3 pawn does a really good job controlling the knight on G6, covering H4, covering F4. White's just played the move queen to C2, and curious to see how things are going to develop. The knight from D2 can jump to the C4 square as well, put pressure on that black bishop on B6, and also open up the bishop from C1 to eventually develop. And those A pawns, almost on both sides, Eric, A4, A5, tend to make an appearance in this opening.
Definitely. Playing A4, space-gaining move, also helps support the knight on C4 because it discourages black from playing B5. Black does play B5 in those cases after A4. Well, now all of a sudden, white's rook on A1 has, you know, a presence in the game, has pressure on the A file.
That's right. A4 does a great job. Would keep the rook open if that exchange happened. Black takes with the knight on E5, clearly looking to trade pieces. And for white here, I think I was going to say the knight on C4 looks a little bit better than the knight on F3. So you capture with the knight from F3. Knight on C4 looks good. There we see that A4 move. It doesn't permanently, you know, entrench that knight on the C4 square, but it starts to do a good job, and even could consider B4, A5, continuing to gain space while playing bishop E3 to complete development.
Yeah, if you give white some time, B4 as you mentioned, A5, bishop E3, put a rook on the D file. It is a symmetrical structure, but white has a bit more space with those queenside pawns and maybe some more active pieces. So a bit of an edge for Hikaru, but still very solid so far.
Yeah, thinking about this, you know, from the other side, it seems like white's making these small incremental gains, but realistically, the evaluation of the position is nothing to be too concerned about. Bishop E3 we probably expect with rook D1 coming for white. Now, for black, the queen will probably need to vacate that D file, queen to E7. You can always challenge the D file. What I'll be looking at is, after a move like bishop E3, it's kind of annoying, Eric, that you're targeting that A7 pawn. It's one of those things that you don't feel like is a big deal, but if you bring that rook to the D file as white, I might actually consider taking that in a lot of lines.
Yeah, you can take it in a lot of lines because it doesn't get trapped easily with B6 because we're ready to play A5. So definitely bishop B3, natural square. And knight H7, though, let's talk about that move.
Yeah, knight H7. The first thing is the move F5, not really a part of this particular position. Tough to achieve and would weaken some squares. So knight H7, I think, is more of a maneuvering kind of move. You do have knight g5 available. It also allows the queen to move out as well, whether to h4 or f6. But this knight can also retreat, right? Knight to f8 can make an appearance into g6 and perhaps into the f4 square as well.
Yeah, queen f6. Denis would like to play rook d8, but as Aman has alluded to, a7 is a bit tender. Knight g5, I like that idea as well. I mean, when you play knight f8, knight g6, white can often play g3, and then there's no follow-up square.
Exactly. And if white would play the move f3, all of a sudden, the dark squares start to become a little bit weak. You know, you can even reposition that knight at that point. It might take a while, Eric, but you might consider knight back to h7, knight back to f8, knight back to g6, and then the move g3 from earlier is no longer that good. So it seems like a lot of maneuvering, but for white, there's no immediate breakthrough. So a move like f3 does weaken some dark squares.
Yeah, I'm expecting Hikaru to play a more flexible move than that. e4 is under pressure a little bit. Maybe queen g6 is an idea. Threatening knight takes h3. The pawn is pinned, and e4. Some tactical opportunities. Maybe that means king h1, prophylactic move.
Yeah, getting ahead of that idea, and then perhaps after queen g6, then you could react to the threat on e4. Whereas right now, it's not quite attacked. If you need a useful move for white, there's a5, but I do think queen g6 is enough of a threat. And we're remembering, white does not want to play bishop takes g5. Not only is that the bishop pair, but the dark squares will be quite weak after that.
Yeah, I'm expecting king h1. h4 is a more ambitious way of dealing with it. But then you do weaken the g4 square. You know, in the future, we look at h4, knight h7. Do we want to play g3? We can do it, but we have weakened the light squares a little bit. I think it's okay, but king h1 is more flexible.
Yeah, I do like the move king h1, and not to h2. You know, it's sometimes difficult to even describe. Do you play king h2? Do you play king h1? These are the nuances of high-level chess. But h1 sort of feels a bit better. It's off of a checking square on that diagonal from the bishop on c7. And Hikaru is clearly deep in thought here. He's gone for king h1, and I do agree, Eric, your suggestion makes the most sense in the current position. He wants to force Denis to play queen g6 before he reacts to it.
Yeah, queen g6 now. I'm trying to figure out if I'd play f3. There's probably some other ideas. This position, I think, is more comfortable for white, all things considered. A little bit of space, a5, these space-gaining moves on the queen side. Quite annoying to deal with. In the future, black wants to play rook d8, wants to trade things off. Denis's style, very, very solid. But this a5 move, at some point, could really harass the queen side.
Yeah, notice that b6 has been played. I think this is almost required. a6 would have weakened the dark squares too much. And guess what? You had to play rook d8 to challenge the d file. So that was a must play for Denis. He's gone for it. Queen f2. I'm wondering if we're going to see this knight on g5 reroute. And you know, I mentioned knight h7, knight f8. That does take a while. Perhaps the bishop on e6 could move, and then you have knight e6, which is a bit of a faster way to reach, for example, the f4 square.
But I like what Hikaru is doing. It's very simple. You can play this quickly. I know he's down on the clock, but a5 at some point, when he puts the queen on f2, it's a7 pawn. It's really a target because black does react with b5. At some point, this pawn on a7 will push to a6, but that's a target in the endgame. I can envision b5 being played by Denis. Maybe knight b2, knight d3, knight c5. We have some squares here. There's a plan, and sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, I like that maneuver a lot. I will say that it's also nice for Denis that knight h7 very clearly needs to reach a certain square, whether it's d7 to combat that knight c5 you just mentioned, or whether it's g6 to go to f4. Black also has some maneuvering that he can get done, and bishop takes on c4 because of exactly what you were highlighting, and this changes things.
Yeah, it changes things. Denis trades on b4. Hikaru picks up a7. So we just have position, you know, 5 pawns apiece. White has the bishop pair, but the material's quite limited here, and we know Denis is quite comfortable playing some of these technical positions, even if he's a little bit worse.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be counterplay in the dark squares. The knight from g5 will make it, for example, to e6 and into f4. And you probably after knight e6, you'd have a pretty critical decision about whether you actually take that knight. And actually, the move b5 has been played, tempting to just liquidate those pawns and getting very, very equal here without any pawns to worry about. All the action is pretty much going to be on the king side now.
And that favors Denis. Bishop pair, specializes in open positions and when there's pawns on both sides of the board because they're long-range pieces. By trading off the queenside pawns, that's not enough for the two bishops.
Yeah, you can play knight f4, but that move alone is not going to be enough. You can see clearly Hikaru is hanging on to this bishop pair. The strongest piece in the position is probably, minor piece in the position, is probably that bishop on a2. It's going to be very, very annoying, and we'll see if Denis can take control of the dark squares. Big idea would be if Denis can achieve dark square bishops traded off the board, that might change things.
Yeah, with dark square bishops off the board, we can envision maybe knight h5, g3 square. As white, you mentioned the bishop on a2 is very good. I'd love to get a rook on the 7th, but I feel like every time Hikaru will attempt that, black will try to challenge it.
Yeah, this rook takes c8 move and bishop takes f7 actually is a successful tactic, but part of it means that bishop c5 would either trade the dark square bishops or opposite bishops, which is what we see here. The dark squares are so weak in Hikaru's position, but similarly, the light squares are weak in black's position, and white's up a pawn.
White's up a pawn. I think Denis, with this opposite bishops, he wants his queen on g3, get that bishop on f4, generate some counterplay on h2, but too many moves away. White's king is all, oh, black's queen f7. There's a mate threat on b8. Rook d8. How do you get that back rank open for white?
Yeah, it's all about the back rank. I'm worried about bishop e3 to f4, right? That's another idea. That's why he keeps attacking the rook. If that's queen d6, may as well give that one an exclamation mark. You can't take it due to checkmate.
Maybe queen g6. Oh, that's annoying. Even though it's opposite bishops, which king is safer? White's king.
But that king is going to make a mad dash up the board. The h-pawn can support on h5 or at least on h4. The move f4 can be achieved, and I think this is actually a real push for white here.
Well, I think it's completely winning for white because you can't move the rook from black off the back rank for the rest of the game. It's going to be checkmate. And now the e-pawn is supported by the bishop, by the rook. Player's down under 5 seconds, but it's a very easy position to play for Hikaru. Simple plan.
Yeah, you can't do anything about this. The e-pawn goes all the way up the board, and even h5, taking the time to play that move, great technique. And that is impressive, Eric, to win that type of position as well.